Gethard.
Hello. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming in and doing this, dude.
Please, I was super flattered.
Well,
anytime someone asks me to do anything, I'm excited.
Well, watching your show, I'm just very concerned that everything's okay with you.
I'll take that. I think that's totally fair.
Yeah.
I think that's totally fair.
It is probably about the craziest show I've ever seen in my life.
Thank you.
I didn't mean that as a compliment. But you've put together a show that the audience is as crazy as the entertainers,
if not more so. And sometimes they kind of push us to places that even we're not comfortable with.
Yeah.
Like there was one episode where they just started, like before I could intro the show and what it was, they started chanting the phrase "eat more butts," and they wouldn't stop for 20 minutes.
20 minutes, yeah.
And it's a live show, so it's not like we can edit it out. It's just we have to just like take part in it and roll with that and make the whole show about people chanting about eating butt.
So at a certain point, you have to think to yourself, this is good that they're stopping the show. That the audience is stopping the show.
Yeah.
Instead of being like, settle down, you just got to roll with it.
I definitely think, I mean, to me, it's like, I just feel like it's more interesting to see where they want to take it. Like, even when it goes well, even when they're not that crazy, I like our show, we take calls and stuff, and I kind of like when the callers throw monkey wrenches at us and make us go in different directions or think about it a way we weren't thinking about before, just because I think that's interesting. And I don't know, I don't want to like be rude, but I don't know that there's much TV that's interesting to me,
Right.
Like,
Right.
it's all set around formulas and formats and structures and marketing plans. So I'm not the most successful guy in the world, and our show's on public access, but the benefit is if we want to do an episode where like we build a burrito on my belly, that's totally fine.
Yeah. As well as being the opposite of show business.
Yeah. Absolute career suicide.
Yeah, right.
But I'm into it. I'm okay with that.
I think that's the interesting thing, that not only are you building this format, but you're building an audience out there, because you're getting calls from all over the country.
Yeah, the world. It's nuts.
Because it's out on the internet at the same time.
Yeah, we stream it online. We get calls from like Sweden and Brazil and Dubai and stuff. It's really, every time, like, it was weird. We started it in New York, and it was mostly just people in New York prank calling us.
Right.
And then we'd start getting calls where they weren't pranking us, and we were so excited that anyone was taking us seriously. Then it was like, oh, we got a call from Pennsylvania. And now we get calls from Dubai. It's really nuts.
Right.
It's really cool to see how it's spread.
Well, it is really, really cool to invent an audience. It's a very tough thing to do.
Yeah.
Only a few performers have ever brought people to places that don't normally participate. But you and I were talking about this before we came out here. Most of your audience could be considered at risk. You know what I mean? Like, these are really edgy young people.
Yeah, a lot of my fans are vocally suicidal, and that's not a joke. I wouldn't make a joke about that. They email me and tell me that they're depressed and suicidal. I've kind of got the market cornered on people who are not feeling good, which has been an interesting thing. We just had a show a few weeks ago where we asked people like, hey, if you used to watch the show and you don't watch anymore, how come? And I would say about 60% of the people called in were like, yeah, like I'm not depressed anymore, so I don't watch your show, which is a weird thing. Like, our audience tends to be people who are really in a dark place.
Yeah.
And they watch it when they need it, and then they like get girlfriends or jobs that make them feel good, and then they stop watching. It's really kind of a strange thing to realize, like, you have these fans that kind of reach out for help, and then you help them, but then they're not your fans anymore.
Well, you're going to lose them one way or another, I guess, right?
I guess so, yeah. I guess so.
Yeah. Now, did you base this concept on anything that you had seen before? I mean, it's...
Well, yeah, I mean, like, I grew up... My whole thing with the show was kind of like, I wanted to make a show that my brother and I would have liked when we were kids. And we used to sit around... We grew up in North Jersey, and we used to watch, like, you'd flip through those upper channels back before cable packages were what they were, and you could find some really weird stuff. And for us, like, there were a few shows that were kind of like Jersey only or East Coast only, like Uncle Floyd. I don't know if you know Uncle Floyd.
Sure, of course. Bowie did the song about it.
Yeah, he was like a weird vaudevillian who had a homemade show on Jersey television. It wasn't public access, but it was like definitely he like leased time, and his sponsor was the Fairfield Flea Market, and he was just like this dude who like really seemed like a guy that I could have just met walking down the street. And his show was real messed up, and he would screw up on camera and they wouldn't edit it out. Like his guys would just make fun of him from off camera and stuff. And I always thought that was so cool. And then like when I was a kid, there was a show on Channel 9 called Steam Pipe Alley.
With Mario Cantone.
Yeah, Mario Cantone. And it would be like they'd show cartoons, and then he'd like do an obstacle course where kids had to like box each other in a bunch of pudding while he like did a Liza Minnelli impression.
Right,
you know? Like, it was just really strange. And like some of those things when I was a kid, they just felt like really raw and small and like local, but also because they were kind of rough around the edges and visibly sort of messed up and cheap, you kind of felt ownership of them. You kind of felt like they were yours. And as a kid, that felt really different than like watching a sitcom that had a laugh track and feeling like, well, this comes from some place called Hollywood. Like Uncle Floyd is a dude who straight up, like, you could be in any diner in New Jersey and he might just be there. You know what I mean? Like, and I really loved that feeling. So for me, it was that. And I also, you know, like, I have made efforts to have a more traditional career in comedy. And we started the show at the UCB Theater for a couple of years, and it went well there. But then I did the public access thing. I got on a sitcom and it didn't go well. And I was like, I want to do something that I'm in control of.
Right.
And sure, it's like really bonkers, but it's mine, you know, like that feels good.
But, you know, we're sitting here talking about this as if it's really small, but Zach Galifianakis has done your show.
Amy Poehler.
So there is this funny people watch this show and go, oh, is there any possible way I could get in on this?
That's been cool. Galifianakis actually came on and then he emailed me afterwards. He was like, dude, if you want to try to pitch this around, I would love to executive produce it, put my name on it. And I was so psyched. And Comedy Central bought a pilot of it. And then they passed. And we were like, okay, man, we'll bring it somewhere else. And then since then, I think 11 other networks have passed. Which is like, you know, that's fine.
Right.
That's okay. It's to be expected, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can understand why a network could pass because, you know, Zach Galifianakis was shaving a kid's head who may have not been old enough to say, I want my head shaved on TV.
Yeah, he was 15.
Right, okay. So that's the kind of stuff that the network would go, what would we get sued for?
You know, I totally get it. I totally get it. Like when they pass, I'm like, I understand, you know, but I also think there's like, I wish that they could think outside the box a little bit more. And I also wish that they could just sort of recognize, like, if they told us, like, we'd rather not have 15-year-olds getting their head shaved or, like, audience members dressing up as Thomas Jefferson and hitting each other with brooms. Like, we've also done a lot of smart stuff and thoughtful stuff, and maybe we could just focus on that if you want. And they don't really. I think there's some aspects that are probably like, I don't know, kind of terrifying to anyone who would have to be responsible for it.
Sure, but also the problem that everyone always has with the suits is they only see what already exists.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So that's the biggest thing, that you're asking them to use their imagination the way you have. It's a different job. Yeah.
And I will say too, especially with Comedy Central, like all their creative people were really behind it. Like it wasn't the type of thing where they kept trying to change it or tinker with it.
Yeah.
They actually were like, we don't want to ruin it. So we don't want to be the guys that ruin your show. We really like it. And they were kind of pushing pretty hard for it. And then it got to the marketing department and they were just like, what are we looking at?
Right,
man?
yeah.
Like, what are we even looking at? This makes no sense. So I get it. I get why a marketing department would not be down.
But if you're Comedy Central, you're probably looking at your own audience when you see that. Like, I think that maybe if you did the jackass dude bro angle of this, they could get it. Like, these guys are extremes. Yeah. But you're saying, I've lived my life as an outsider, and now I'm gathering outsiders, which, by the way, is punk rock. If you want to look at something.
And I grew up on punk rock, so that's definitely been a huge influence on me. Like, I really feel like I model my approach to building the show more like a band than a comedy project, because it has built an audience and they do identify with it. And I don't know, I almost feel like maybe it's just hubris or even stupidity, but I'm like, well, if they box me out, then I'll just have to keep finding more people who don't want to be a part of what they're offering anyway and just build it until it's undeniable. So that's kind of an exciting challenge.
Well, you're saying that, but I watched you last night and you said this is probably the last show I ever did.
Yeah, it might be. I don't know. I want to bring it. I want to keep going. It's I think we'll keep going. After last night's show, I walked away feeling like, yeah, we're not done yet. But we did. The title of the show last night was "Should We Keep Doing This?" We just asked the audience to call in and let us know. And most of them said yes, which was good. I would say like a good 3 out of every 5 said yes. So it's a pretty good hit rate, you know?
Yes, sure.
60% of your own fans like your show.
But I think they also like the idea of now I know, what to do with. Like, you remember with punk rock that when a band would start to get too big, the original fans would be like, what?
Yeah, turn their backs on them. And I also think there's something really interesting. Like, I don't know, like we live in an age where like kids have Twitter. And I think a lot of the appeal for that is like, they can watch Parks and Rec and then go and be like, hey, Aziz, like, good episode tonight, and actually get at him. And that's the theory behind it. So I like the idea that if I'm feeling a little burnt out, I can actually just say that and then ask them what they want me to do.
Right.
And it's like a really, like, trying to heighten that idea of like, you're in control of it. You have all access. It's almost more like a video game where you're controlling me as the main character than anything else.
Well, so, another reason why I think you get these edgy kids is because you talk about stuff that you've done, in your life or places that you've been, which I would think if I was a young kid and didn't feel like I was part of the norm, I'm sure I'd be like, not only is this show for me, but this guy understands exactly what I'm talking about.
That's been real nice. Like, to realize that people actually connect with it makes me feel like I remember when I used to go to punk shows as a kid, and then the bands would play and like, you'd be in a church basement and they'd just get off stage and then they'd just be hanging out like everybody else. And that always meant a lot to me. And actually, I feel like the thing that actually kind of hit me in the gut the most was that kid who got his head shaved by Zach Galifianakis. He calls the show all the time. And he once said something to some friends of mine who on a podcast where they were like, why do you like the show so much? And he's like, well, I used to call it just to mess with Gethard because I was trying to prank it. And then I realized he would be like, play along. So then I started trying to be funny with my calls. And then I realized I was just talking to him, and he's like, it was a couple of years ago I started calling, and I realized like my parents were going through a divorce, and it was like, this guy was the only adult who would actually like listen to me and have a conversation. And I was like, oh, that's really nice. That actually made me kind of get emotional. But that is the connection with the fans of like, if they want to call up and like do some dumb bit, we can do that. If they want to call up and get real, we can do that. There's no consequences. There's no ratings. No one in charge of public access even watches our show. We can't get kicked off. Like, we would have to threaten to kill somebody or take our genitals out in the studio.
And we're close all the time with both of those things.
We have come very close.
Yeah.
But New York public, it's all defined by obscenity law, public access. So in Manhattan, there's almost none. There's almost no actual rules. It's pretty great.
Well, who's the woman who's done that access show for years?
Robin Bird.
Robin Bird is...
Number one question I get, do you know Robin Bird?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one time I saw her getting on a bus, and I'm like, that's like the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life.
Most of the friends I know who grew up in Manhattan are like, the first time I discovered my body, Robin Bird. That seems to be like a rite of passage for New York preteens.
Yeah. And she's still doing it. You know?
I'm happy to be in that proud tradition.
Well, and the thing is, with Chris's career is, he doesn't have to do this show. You do TV shows. You've got a fine stand-up career, improv career, and a writer. So this that you're doing, some people find themselves, in a position where there's nothing else they can do, but you're really choosing to do this kind of show.
Yeah, I put more energy into it than anything else, and it's something that was always unlikely, and in the past 4 or 5 months has become definitely not gonna work career-wise.
Right.
But I still love it more than anything, so it just feels like that's a pretty, I don't know, it feels like the thing I should keep doing, although 12 different television networks have told me this will not be your job.
Right.
Ever. So I don't know why I think it's going to work out.
Right.
They've told me 12 different times it's not going to work out. But I don't know. I just have a good feeling about it.
Well, the great thing is there are like 180 networks now, you know, like sooner or later.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, I don't want to talk bad. Anybody who gave me an opportunity, that's great.
Sure.
Some of the networks that passed on us, I was like, oh, wow. Like when Comedy Central passed on us, I was like, that's cool. That's fine.
Yeah.
And then, you know, like IFC, MTV, I'm like, great, fine. And then it's like, when Pivot is passing, I'm just like, yeah. They're up and comers. They're up and comers. I respect them, but I would like to think they'd want me to be part of the team.
Right.
Yeah, that's okay. Like networks passed on us that aren't even carried on like Time Warner, the big like networks that aren't carried by the largest cable systems. We're like, we don't want you to be a piece of our small piece of the pie.
Right.
That was a little depressing.
Even though it looks like you could produce the show for like $1.380.
Yeah,
right? I mean, it's nothing.
I lose like $40 a week on the show. I don't even lose a respectable amount of money. I lose like a pathetic amount of money, like $35 I spent on the show this week. It would be better if I spent like $1,000 a week on the show, because then it would mean it was a good show. But instead, it's like, no, for this bit, I had to buy like 2 spools of fishing line and a dinosaur mask. Like that's what I spent my $30 on. Really, I don't know. It's sometimes it messes with my self-esteem, but then other times I'm like, it's the greatest thing in the world. And when I go on the road as a stand-up, I get more and more people coming up to me who actually have seen the show.
Right.
And that makes me realize like there might be the potential to like build this thing that allows me to exist outside of the rules, and that's the most exciting thing in the world.
Right.
So I don't know. That's not likely, but it seems like there's potential there, and that would be the coolest.
But you're going to have to wait until most of your fans are old enough to go into a real nightclub anyway.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, like 7 years from now, you could just walk into a place and they're going crazy.
I hope so. That would be great. It's funny. I tour with Mike Birbiglia a lot.
Sure.
He has me opening for him on his new tour. And he really early, he would like bring me out and we'd go to all these cities. And, you know, he's really huge, especially in the Midwest. And we do like the signing line afterwards. And everybody wants to talk to Mike. Nobody's really interested in me, but I'd get like 4 or 5 people a night coming up and saying they like the show. And he really quickly, after like the second or third date we did together, he was like, I can see your fans coming from a mile away, man. Like they like can't make eye contact. They like all have limps and stuff. Like they're all like anybody who's like a real outcast. Yeah. I see them limping towards us and I know they're going right for you. And I'm like, yep. Well, it is true. Like with him, they'll walk up and be like, what merchandise do you have that I can buy? And with me, they'll be like, you saved me from killing myself. And I'm like, great. Yeah. Cool. This is a weird career, but one I'm very proud of.
Well, see, that's the thing, because real like nerd culture has kind of been taken over by Hollywood. It's when you look at Comic-Con now, they're not the outsiders.
Well,
you know?
Yeah, man. And like, you know, Chris Hardwick does Nerdist, and I respect him a lot. And I met him. He's a nice guy. I respect what he's built. I think he's hilarious. Many good qualities. But is he a nerd?
Right.
I don't know. Like him and Olivia Munn are nerd icons these days. Like if they had a baby together, it would be the most attractive human being ever. It would not have the same childhood I had. Being a nerd for them is not what it was for me. So our fans, I've actually encouraged my fans to refer to themselves as losers instead of nerd, just because I think it's more accurate these days. But I do think I think there is truth to that. Like I have like deformed elbows and hands and like a big head. Like that's what being a nerd was when I was a kid. Yeah. And I don't want to be like, it's not a huge thing. Who cares? I'm still a privileged white guy. It doesn't matter. But it has been co-opted, and kind of like that we've built a corner of the comedy world where those kids can hang out. Because I think comedy in particular has gotten like hip over the last 10 years. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, there's like a lot of like I'll go to festivals and like the comedians will be in like the VIP section of clubs, and I'm like, I didn't think this was what comedy was for. Right. So we could hang out and get bottle service. I thought it was so we could like make kids laugh who weren't cool enough to like know about good bands, you know? Like that's what I thought it was for. So I still like those people. That's who I'm comfortable around because that's what I grew up as, you know? So I don't know. I don't want to. What
was it like for you growing up, pal?
It was okay. I grew up in North Jersey in like a town that was like very divided class-wise and racially, and it was kind of like was one of these places where, like, when I went to college, I went to Rutgers. It was 40 minutes away, and I'd, like, tell stories about things that happened in my town growing up, and I would think they were funny stories, and then people would be like, this is one of the most messed up things I've ever heard, man.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, wait, all of that didn't need to happen? And then I just became filled with, like, rage and sadness for a couple of years. So, yeah, I was like, there were some tough aspects to it. Kind of had to, like, learn how to be tough, and I was not obviously someone who was prone to toughness, and definitely I had a lot of depression issues from early on too. So it's kind of like a sad kid in a tough town, which wasn't the best thing. And I look like this, and my last name spells the words "get hard." So
yeah, right.
Well, there's a lot of
yeah. Even the non-witty kids feel like, hey, here's something I can grab.
Yeah, they had. I was like ducks in a barrel in a certain way,
Yeah.
So yeah.
At what age do you really think to yourself, oh, it is going to be tougher than me than for some other kids?
Well, I mean, like, the truth of it, I like to just be totally honest. Yeah. I don't want to depress everybody, but the real truth for me is that I have a brother who's 2.5 years older than me, so he's 3 grades ahead, and he got bullied bad, like physically. Like, he got bullied once to the point where, like, a bully broke his shoulder bone, like real bad stuff. Like, and I saw a lot of it firsthand. I saw him coming home. And then my mom would, like, go down to our school and be like, hey, these kids, like, broke my kid's shoulder. And they'd be like, well, we can't get them in trouble because they have real bad home lives and they'll get hit at home and we don't want to be responsible for that. And my mom was like, so what? So what happens? And they were like, well, nothing. And she was like, my kid's getting beat up. So I was younger than that. And I was like, okay, I need to watch my back. And the second someone messes with me, I need to, like, fight them or scare them off. So I just, like, had a lot of, like, weird anger issues and real, like, I had my guard up real high because of that, because I just saw my older brother get brutalized, all through elementary, junior high, even into high school, and then no consequences, no adults taking any responsibility for it. It was really crazy, There's like one time in our high school where him and his best friend were walking down the hall and 2 kids, it's like elaborate bullying, like bizarre levels of bullying. These 2 kids took an ace bandage and ran up to them and wrapped them in it and then beat them. And then the school was just like, tough break. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, cool. Well, I guess that really affected my personality. That really affected a lot. I was angry. I was, like, really pissed off at the world for a lot of my childhood. And it took me years to unwrap that. And I think that's part of now why I'm, like, a very sort of, like, emo positive guy, because I think I spent a lot of time furious, and I wish I didn't.
And you don't want to go back there. It's because it still exists somewhere.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I work really hard to just, like, keep my emotions in check. And, like, the thing that does remain from it is I react big to stuff. Like, if I'm in a situation that makes me happy, I get super happy. If I get in a situation that gets me angry, super angry. And a lot of that is just, like, you go through life seeing, like, weird violence with no consequences. And, like, that's the type of stuff I would talk about at Rutgers. Like, listen to this one. These kids tied my brother up with a bandage, punched him in the head.
Right.
And I'd be, like, laughing, and they'd be looking at me like, no. And I was like, okay. My town was incredibly strange. It's like Twin Peaks, man.
Well, later, they put together The Sopranos, so people know North Jersey is that way.
Yeah, a lot of it took place in West Orange, my hometown. Christopher Moltisanti lived there. And I would watch it, and I was like, oh, no, this all seems normal.
They go to the same diners you go to.
Yeah, man. Yeah. The Versailles Diner, Route 46, baby.
Well, I think that, when you see the way you grew up and the things that you felt, and now you've built this community of outsiders, which, puts people inside all of a sudden.
Yeah, it is. It's really important to me. It's, like, very cheesy to say, but it's like, it's hard because I feel confident enough, like, I've done enough acting jobs and things like that I'm like, I bet I could go do that. And I bet I could have a living. I bet I could, like, get weird. I could be, like, the weird computer hacker on CSI. You know what I mean? Like, I bet I could do that. Or, like, have one scene in a movie every 2 years. Like, I think I could do that. But I don't know that would connect with anybody like the stuff I'm doing now does. So it's, like, a very, very black and white choice between, like, stuff I love or a comfortable living.
Right.
thus far,
that's also responsibility when you're in the middle of that community. And, that happened to Jerry Garcia, where he turned around and he goes, if I walk away, this whole community gets rocked.
Yeah.
So what do I do?
I definitely have a lot of fear, or like the way that some people reach out and they're like, this thing makes me happy and not much else does. I'm like, that is a lot of responsibility. It's very nice, but it also kind of weighs on you. And then also I'm like, it is this community of people that they all know each other as well.
Right.
Like, because of social networking these days, like when I grew up, like when we would find tapes of Andy Kaufman, to us, that me and my brother, that was like, oh my God, here's this thing and nobody else knows about it. Nobody else really knew about anything but Taxi, But now these weirdos find our show and they can all go on Tumblr and talk to each other and hang out and tweet at each other, and they become friends. And that to me is a really beautiful thing that I don't want to walk away from.
Imagine if you had that when you were a kid and you were angry and scared. If you found out, hey, there's another kid on the other side of the country, he's angry and scared, and we just met another kid. Yeah. That changes. I mean,
I think so.
Yeah. I mean, that's a whole different lifestyle than we can even understand.
Yeah. It's really, I really envy it in a lot of ways. Although the internet does connect people like that, but it also has so many dark corners that it's like, it also connects a lot of maniacs. So it has that side too. But that's
it does. And also the people who go out and prey on those groups, trolls that come into those kind of, it's never, I mean, the bullying thing that they act like we've got to stop bullying. Yeah. I just don't think they know where kids' heads really are. Yeah.
Yeah. It's really, I feel like one thing that the show reminds me of, like as an adult, I don't really feel this anymore, but it reminds me that when you're a kid, you forget that the world's not about you. Like, we're all kind of like the heroes of our own story in our head. But when you're 16 and something bad happens, it feels like the end of the world. Right. So like these days when you hear these stories about like, oh, like a girl sent a naked picture to a guy and he put it all over Facebook and everybody in the school knows about it. It's like, that's a huge deal on its surface. But then you remember, to a 16-year-old, that feels like you're never going to bounce back. Nothing's ever going to change. Like, that's a level of bullying that's like psychological to a degree that I never had to deal with,
Right.
It's really
no, it's true. And you would try to explain to them, no, look at Kim Kardashian. Not only did she bounce back, but it's good. But when you were young and everything is so raw, you know what I mean? You're right. It's like that song Girls Talk by Elvis Costello, where, they just made a joke about him and he was crushed. Yeah. You can't imagine that kind of stuff. So here you are, that lifeline for that, but also the responsibility that comes along with it.
Yeah, there's definitely times where I'm like, I just want to be funny. I don't know.
Right.
I don't know if I want to keep people alive, like I didn't sign up for that. I just signed up for improv classes and I was like, this is fun, and now all of a sudden I'm here, like it's definitely strange some days, but on most days I'm super grateful for it and proud of it.
Improv was the lifeline for you too, right?
Yeah, that was huge for me. I went to Rutgers, and like I said, like a lot of that anger from how I grew up was really coming to the surface, and as I realized that it hadn't been a normal way to grow up, I think it actually made me even angrier, because I was like, oh, there's so many experiences I had that I didn't need to have. It's not right. And really went into a shell, was not feeling good for a long time, for years. And then when I was 19, I found the UCB Theater and I started doing improv there. And it was small. Back then, it was like nobody had ever gotten jobs out of it. Now it's a big institution. Back then, it was like, I remember when Andy Daly, who's a great comedic actor, he got cast on Mad TV and they shut the theater down for the night and threw a party. I'm like, now if they threw a party every time someone got a job, the theater would be closed 7 nights a week. It's such a successful place. But I showed up there and I was this kid and I was like shy and scared, this angry kid. And I was funny though. And it was the first place I ever went in my life where it was like, that's what mattered. It was a meritocracy. It was like, it doesn't matter that you're 19 and weird and have like a shitty ball haircut, pardon my French. It was like, you're funny. So like, come hang out with these like 30-year-olds who just respect you because it's all about being funny. That's what it's about. And it just evened the playing field in a way that was like really a lifesaver for me.
Well, that the real difference in that background is so many stand-ups have come on here and talked about jealousy and fighting, and if their friend gets something, how hurtful it makes them. But the UCB people are just really like so much into their friends rising that it's oddly shocking. And where did that come from? Did that come from the original members?
Yeah, I think the founders of it were just always so delighted when someone could come out of their theater and make a living out of it. I think they came up in Chicago, and I think they knew how hard it was. Mm-hmm. So when they built their theater and other people could use that to actually build a living, I think that was just so exciting for them, and that energy infected the whole early wave of us. And it's definitely cool to see it happen. It's also, like, I think there's still some elements of that. There are only so many jobs that go around, but I think stand-up is more cutthroat. I also think improv by its nature, you can't do it on your own. Mm-hmm. You have to have someone else there who you're getting along with. So, those are people you build a bond with where you live or die on stage together. It's not about who's the funniest. It's about, can we all make it through this without looking like idiots, So, but it's definitely hard. Like, I was in an improv group where while I was in the group, my two best friends got cast on The Office and Saturday Night Live, and I was thrilled for them, but it also has that moment of just like, okay, great. No, I'm so psyched, and I genuinely am so psyched. Am I terrified as well? A little bit, but I'm thrilled. It's cool. Can you get me tickets? Awesome. That's great, That's cool too. But yeah, it was a strange thing to be around as that place really blew up. Really strange.
And now, like you said, it's an institution where people come from all over to take those classes.
Yeah, it's really like there's like thousands of students. It's nuts. It's really insane. It's like mind-boggling how big it's gotten.
And you started getting your own nights there and doing weird stuff.
Yeah, I became like I started there as an improviser. Started doing some solo storytelling stuff, but then I started staging these weird events. Like I did a show on a bus where we went to New Jersey, and I tell stories from my life in the places where they happened. And we did a show where if you weren't funny, you got shot by a paintball gun on stage. And that kind of built into like this reputation where people started calling those like, oh, that's kind of like a Gethard show, which was just like anytime someone did something that was kind of like emotionally ill-advised or physically violent, that was like kind of like my scene. And then they eventually just gave me a show where they're like, just go do all your weird stuff one Saturday a month. And that kind of blew up, and that became the Gethard Show. And then we switched it to public access a couple years after that.
Yeah. You wrote really recently about one night that you were up on stage and somebody walked in.
Yeah, Robin Williams showed up one night. It was so cool. I met him 2 or 3 times. But he just showed up unannounced one night at the UCB Theater to do an improv show. And it was really like, it's rare that you meet someone who fulfills all your expectations of what you want them to be. Like he was just the sweetest, nicest, and funniest guy there was. And it was just like such a really, just like a really great night to be able to perform with a guy who was like legitimately one of my heroes growing up. And he was there, and he was like sweet and shy, and kind of like got uncomfortable with there being booze in the cooler in the green room, and we had to kind of get that out of there. And he was so like shy and quiet, but then on stage, it was like being on stage with a tornado. It was really like, I haven't really experienced anything like that before or since. And it was really, I'm glad that I get to say I was on stage with him.
Yeah, and as the years go by, it's just going to seem crazier. You'll tell your grandchildren that someday, and it'll be like, I don't know, I had tea with Abraham Lincoln. It's going to sound nuts to them. It's going to sound crazy.
Yeah.
But you as a performer, which is the real Robin Williams, the guy that was shy backstage or the tornado on stage?
I mean, I'd have to imagine that the guy backstage is choosing to tap into that guy on stage for reasons. I have to think that the backstage, in my experience, the backstage comedians is closer to the real comedian, I feel like a lot of performers, in my experience, especially the ones that like go manic on stage and like can't stop themselves and have to unleash on the audience and like need it, and kind of like where it feels like this, like they're feeding something in themselves. Like a lot of those guys, I think it's what happens off stage that makes them have to do that on stage. So
yeah, you made me think of Farley when you were even explaining that. You know, that he was so, and we could go through the list. But I think which is interesting is that off stage, you and Robin had somewhat of the same personality and probably same kind of fears from being a kid. but you bring that guy on stage.
Yeah.
And that's really rare.
For me, that was just like not really an option after a certain point. Like like I said, I started in New York when I was 19 and I was still sorting my head out. So I was on stage multiple times a week, every week from when I was a teenager. So for me, like as I started going to therapy and I started like actually figuring out my head, I didn't really have any other way to explore it than to talk about it on stage. So that was a really scary thing to start like saying in front of an audience, like, hey, like, especially back in the day in like the early 2000s, like to go on antidepressants, first of all, was like, people were like, oh, you're broken. Like you got judged a lot harder for it 10 years ago than you do now. But also to go on stage and be like, hey, like I might not have a good show tonight because I got put on this crazy antipsychotic that makes me have weird blackouts. So if I get weird, it's because I'm blacking out because I'm on a weird antipsychotic medication. Like I just didn't know any better. As a kid, I didn't know what to do except tell the audience that. So I kind of had to live it out publicly just because the only place I felt good was on stage. Yeah. So that's where I had to deal with it. So it was a very strange path to walk, but I don't know. It got me where I am today. So I guess that's okay.
Yeah, sure. But, the weird thing is no one likes to die on stage. But when you're that open and honest and you're not connecting, that's got to be the worst kind of death.
It is. Like especially... more so as a stand-up. I primarily just do stand-up now. I haven't been I feel like improv will always be my foundation. The UCB will always be my home. But I really, the past couple years in particular, I've just time-wise only done stand-up. I've been really obsessed with it. And bombing in stand-up is way harder than bombing at improv because, you have other people that you can go backstage and sulk with improv. But like, especially if I'm up there and I'm like, okay, I'm going to try to talk about this really vulnerable moment in my life. I think I can make it funny. And then you get up there and people are like, not just like not into it, but bored by your, like, I'm going to bare my soul tonight. I'm really going to try to like tap into something and be an artist. And you can like hear them ordering their drinks. Like that is brutal, but it's okay. It's all right. Like I am pretty, like I have my material that works and I can pretty quickly sense like, okay, they're not down for me to go all emo tonight. Let me just get back to the stuff that I know will hit them. So I tend to build material very, very slowly because of that. Because I just have to go up again and again and again and again, which everybody does. Yeah. But for me, like most of the stuff that I like the most is very personal. And especially at like a 2-drink minimum club, they're not having that. Yeah. They're not into that.
Yeah, they've got their own rough week.
And they're like, some guy in Times Square told me to come here. I didn't know it was $30. I didn't know the drinks were $12 each. I came with a date. This cost me $140 on the night. Make me laugh right now. You know what I mean? Like, we don't want to hear about how hard it was growing up white in New Jersey. You know what I mean? Like, we're not interested. We're not interested in your problems, Make us laugh, so...
How does that material differ from the stuff that you write, like in your books and stuff? Like how, when you're doing stand-up with those same kind of stories?
Well, stand-up to me, I started telling real long, sprawling stories, not at stand-up shows, more at UCB, more at like alternative shows around town, which are like non-stand-up clubs that the audiences are generally like a little more relaxed, a little more artsy, and they'll go with you. And then I had a lot of stand-up friends who started inviting me to do their shows, and I would just bomb because I didn't know how to do punchlines. And then there were a few comics that I saw who really split the difference. Mike Birbiglia being one of them, John Mulaney being another one, where it's like they're telling these long stories, but you can feel it out. Like there's the punchline, there's the punchline, there's the punchline, there's the punchline. So that became a very addictive thing to me to figure out, like, what's the longest story I can tell where the punchline ratio will carry them through it. Like, can I do a whole 15-minute set in the club that's one story, and will they go with that even though the comic before me and the comic after me told, 50 jokes in the same amount of time? So for me, that was a real challenge and really addictive, and I'm happy that I've, like, started to figure it out. I think I've figured it out pretty well, and hopefully I'll just keep getting better. So it's definitely hard and a real mental exercise, but a good one. And when it does... On my best nights as a stand-up, they'll laugh because there's enough punchlines, but then they'll also come up to me after the show and maybe feel like they know me a little bit more than a guy who just does like set up punchline, set up punchline, set up punchline.
Sure. Then they feel connected to you, and then they can email you that they're ready to kill yourself, and it'll be your responsibility to
they
take
find
care
me
of that.
public email address I put on my website like an idiot, and then I stay up till 2:30 in the morning trying to figure out how to answer and crying because the people who like me are damaged human beings who I'm very protective of.
Yeah, you're protective of, and really you're, drawing more in all the time.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so. We'll see.
Well, I brought up Robin, and there was two things that came out that really, in the same week with you. One where you told that story about Robin Williams, which I thought, just from in terms of writing and for us that, thought so much of him that you could really connect. That was the guy. I think a lot of us wanted that experience you have of meeting the two Robins. And then the other piece that you did about depression, and you showed that picture of you of how you get sometimes.
I took a picture of myself while I was having like a panic attack, like a meltdown. That was hard to put up there.
Yeah.
But I felt, I don't know, I have all these kids who kind of look to me for that. And I just wanted to, it's so sad to me how often these kids who talk to me will say, like, I tried to talk to my parents and they told me to get tougher, or like I wanted to go see a doctor and my parents convinced me that that was like a faux pas, or that I should be ashamed of that. And I just feel like it's so dumb to, like, it's the idea that you have to be ashamed because you're sick is really just off to me. And I felt it for so long, all the excuses, just like, I should be tougher. I don't really have any problems in my life. Like, I'm not going to be as creative. And then I went on medicine and I was like happier and more relaxed, and people liked me more because I could have a normal conversation. And I was able to be more creative because I could like focus and be organized and see ideas through to fruition. And it was just I look back with such regret over like, just thought I was going to disappoint everybody, and I knew I was going to be judged. And all that was true, but none of that was more important than being healthy. So I just wanted to put that picture out there in a time where, I think there's a lot of statistics that when a famous person kills themselves, a lot of other people who are maybe on the edge will pull the trigger, both metaphorically and literally, depending on their style of choice. And some people wanted to laugh there, but didn't. I could feel that. I heard.
They were like,
you heard like
that's inappropriate.
Did you hear? You heard a lot of people exhale through their nose because they didn't want to laugh.
Well, they wanted to be the second person who laughed.
Exactly. A lot of people are waiting for someone else to break the seal. But yeah, like, I don't know. There's nothing to be ashamed of, man. I don't get it. We all know it's a problem.
Yeah.
You see, like, I was amazed to read, like, as I kind of like became a guy who spoke out about this stuff sort of by accident. It wasn't anything I set out to do. It's just by interacting with these fans. And then, like, I get more into it. You read statistics where it's like suicide's the second leading cause of death in college students. And that's like, whoa, like, really? That's nuts. That's nuts. But I remember what it was like to be 20 years old and feel like I can't go get help because that means something's wrong with me. Suck it up. And then, so to me, I'm like, well, I'm real messed up. I still sometimes have days where I can't get out of bed. Just last week, I had a day where I spent the whole day all manic and then crying all night, So, like, that happens. That's something that is just a reality in my life. I'm okay with it. Let's put a picture. Maybe if some kid sees that picture and he's like, oh, I've seen that in myself, he'll feel like there's at least somebody out there who will talk about it. I'll tell you what the real sad thing to me is that I'm like an underground dude. I have a cult following, but I am largely a nobody, and I'm the first to admit that. And I'm really amazed how many people who email me are like, you're the first person who I've heard talk about this, or you're the first person. I'm like, first of all, people in their real lives should be talking about this. I'm sure there's other people in their actual lives who aren't the host of a dumb public access TV show they could be talking to. But also, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of celebrities who we all know the stories, who you don't hear about them dealing with this stuff until something tragic happens. And I feel like if I can do a reasonable amount of good, it's a shame to me that publicists are probably telling other people to not speak out because they'll damage their brand. Sure. And they could be doing a ton of good. That to me is the saddest thing in the world, you know?
Well, you know, I also think this thing of, like, most of us know the word depression, and we have to, you know, we go to dark places and we have to snap out of it. But I don't think we know what it's like to be stuck in bed for 2 days, crying straight. But we think if someone says I'm depressed, and you're like, hey, you ought to go to a ball game. You know, you just say the worst, stupidest thing to people.
Yeah, people be like, you'll bounce back. And it's like, will I? Because my life has felt like hell for 2 straight weeks, and I don't know what to do. Nothing makes me happy. Things that I know should make me happy aren't.
Yeah.
When is this gonna stop? And like, it's really, that's why one of the things that gets me really, really angry is that whenever someone kills themselves, you'll hear people start saying, oh, that's the coward's way out. And it's like, I don't think that's true. I think that's actually such a demeaning thing to say, because you're dealing with people who their lives become so scared and so driven by fear and sadness that they don't know what to do except to overcome every human instinct and not be alive anymore. Like, to say that the coward is just so brutal, Like, it's the only way you can die where you get, like, judged immediately. It's the only way, you know?
That or falling in front of a train. Those are the two. Yeah. Like, how stupid.
Texting.
But,
dying while texting. That's the other way.
Those people, you're like, I would never. But, you know, when you think about, and I'm going to go back to Robin because it still hasn't left me.
Yeah.
And he had everything that we would think is the American dream. He had talent. He had success. He was admired. He was famous. He had money. And none of those things seemed to work at that really dark time.
Yeah.
And that is something that I think would scare everyone. So maybe you have to say, oh, what a coward, or what an ass, because you're afraid of the human aspect of that, of what if I feel that one day?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And I think the fact that the thing that you want to hear, the most heartbreaking thing in the world, this was like, I wrote that thing and it kind of went all over the internet and a lot of people were saying nice stuff, and I was proud of that. And then my mom called me and she was like, she said 2 things that were like, it was like a combo of heartbreak where she was like, it's just so sad to think that a guy who made everybody else that happy was that sad. Like, that just kills me. She was like, that kills me to know, like, he was that sad, that guy. Mm-hmm. And then she paused and went, makes me worry about you too. And I was just like, oh God. Oh God.
Yeah.
What have I done? I've made my whole public persona a thing that just scares my mom.
Right, yeah.
Great.
Great. You're having a good show, and that's just making her more nervous. Uh-oh.
Yeah.
He's killing. I'm so worried now.
Yeah. But you know what I'll say too? Like, I talk about this stuff so much, and like, it's very emo. But one thing I also say is, like, for me at this point, I still get depressed, but I'm happy to say that at the age of 34, it's almost like having a cold. It's like that thing, you know, like when you get a cold and you're just like, oh, when's this going to go away?
Yeah.
And then you just go about your day and it's like,
so nothing causes these episodes. You're not.
Generally, no.
You know, the Comedy Central thing didn't set you off.
I was pretty okay about that. Surprisingly, my fiance was like, I was expecting you to flip out. She's like, I was expecting to come home and find you curled up in the corner crying. And I was like, cool, I love you too, you know?
Yeah.
That I was pretty tough with.
Boy,
you know?
just you was saying that, I'm thinking, what did she sign up for?
Yeah,
you know,
right?
Wow.
And I'm telling you, she is like so cool, beautiful. This is my friends Alex and Serena, out of my league, right? Very much so. A friend of mine, just without hesitation, was like, your fiance, out of your league. She's a professional dancer, beautiful, so cool.
Yeah,
friends with everybody. I have no idea why she's doing this. I have no idea why she's marrying me. I'm funny. I got that.
Right.
I make her laugh. Outside of that, I'm like, why? I've tried to tell her. I'm like, go.
Yeah.
She won't listen, man. She insists on getting married to me.
That's the exact opposite of a love letter, which you get away from me. Run.
Yeah.
Run.
Yeah.
But, you know, I've always said this, that you can only judge men by the women who fall in love with them.
Yeah.
Or men, because we're in that, you know, era now, and I want to preface this here. So I want to point that out. But it is, she sees something of you that, because she hasn't been trained like you to see all the bad things.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, for a guy with low self-esteem, I'll tell you, like, it really is like, she is the first person, like, I'll like do a lot of self-deprecating stuff.
Right.
And then it hits a point where it's clearly driven by like actual feelings towards myself. And she like started doing this thing where she'd be like, don't say that about my fiance. And I was like, oh, that's love. All right, nice. I've really only exclusively dated people who don't like or respect me prior to this.
Right.
So what a welcome change of pace.
Yeah.
I almost exclusively, my type was generally people who were mean to me. That was my type before her. It's true. It's totally true.
But see, here's what you need, and you're getting married when?
Next Saturday.
Okay. Yeah, that's great.
Thank you.
I think you should not write your own wedding vows. I think that would be a nice gift to her.
You don't think so?
No.
You kind of see you see the direction I'm thinking for them.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm terrified that she'll go, you're right. Or maybe her dad will jump up and grab her.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm a pretty good guy. I mean, I'm a pretty good guy, but she could, if she wanted to go marry a millionaire, she could do that.
Well, maybe.
Instead, she's signing up for a life of very low income. Very low income.
You were just one break away, dude. Just one break away.
Yeah, but I've been hearing that for like 8 years, man.
Yeah.
I've been hearing I'm the next big thing from UCB for like 8 years.
Yeah.
And now there's people who like I taught in their classes who are like killing it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I might not be the next. I might not. That's fine.
well,
I might be like the first guy from UCB to just totally whiff. That's okay.
Do you know how long it took Henry Ford to get rich? 3 months. So, oh shit. Wait, that's not the best idea.
Wow.
You seriously, you really were hoping you'd hear something helpful.
I was hoping you were saying longer than the 14 years I've been doing comedy. No. Wow. Yeah, I'm behind the curve.
No, but you're doing something. You refuse to be part of that mainstream.
That is,
and you're building an audience where one didn't exist.
That is where I drive myself nuts.
Yeah.
Where I'll be like, oh, I don't make any money, and then it's like, well, you do a public access TV. I do it.
Yeah.
I sign up to do this stuff. And like, I refuse to move to Los Angeles. And then I'm like, I don't know why I haven't broken out. And it's like, because you chose to do a medium, you chose to do public access, a medium that is everyone just like laughs at and rolls their eye. Of course. Yeah, you're not going to be a millionaire, man, if you want to do public access. Like, I'm like, even I am like, yeah, I understand the math on that doesn't work out, but I still complain about it.
Yeah, sure. But, I will give you a role model who has nothing to do with you, and that's Tyler Perry. Went out and found like church ladies, brought that comedy to them, and now they go to movies and his movies, but no one else's. And, it grows and grows, and he's running his own scene, and it's amazing.
Some other guys who I actually really admire, without irony, don't listen to their music, the Insane Clown Posse.
Right.
Like, how are they pulling that off?
Yeah.
They managed to find an audience.
Yeah.
That they cornered the market on people who are willing to dress up as evil clowns.
Right.
That's a market that they found out about.
And now, they took that so far that the FBI recognizes them as organized crime. Yeah. They went that far.
They started as clown rappers who are now the mafia.
Yeah, right.
It's really nuts.
Yeah, it's only in America, I guess.
Yeah. If those guys can convince people to wear like hockey jerseys and spray Faygo on each other.
Yeah.
My show's not that inaccessible.
I think your show is the exact opposite.
Thank you.
Inaccessible. I think when you watch that show, you really get the feeling that everyone is invited. And I really think that you've got to, again, this isn't comedy, but Andy Warhol did the same thing. And he started to say, these are superstars and this is a superstar, until finally the media started to believe him, And you have stars in your audience that come up. The human fish is not going to make it anywhere else. But with he feels like, I'm like, there he is. There's the human fish.
But he is a very, very talented improv guy.
Yeah.
And that one of the things that makes me actually feel best about my show is that I do really feel like I'm like, man, we came so close. Like, we were really this close to getting on Comedy Central. We could all feel it, man. Like, they were at our taping. I mean, we taped our pilot. A girl came from Brazil. People came from Honolulu, from Canada, to watch this thing that's a public access thing. And all the Comedy Central executives were there, and they were like, whoa, this is something, this is different, man. Like,
right.
This is crazy, you know? So we were that close, and we ultimately, it looks like we missed, and that's okay. But one of the things that I'm happiest about when you say, like, they're stars is, like, I'm pretty certain that a lot of the comedians who came through New York and worked on my show or did bits on my show, they're going to be the ones in the next 4 or 5 years that you really start to hear about. I really feel that. I really feel like we were a home for a lot of the most talented people in New York during our era, and that is such a cool thing. Like, I have a feel like one of our guys was just at the Emmys because he got hired to write at Key and Peele. Now, he didn't get hired because they saw him on the Gethard Show, but like, he was a guy in New York who was doing that, you know? Like, there was a guy who's doing bits on our show for a long time. He's writing for Seth Meyers now, and like, makes me feel good that a lot of the most talented people flocked to our show and found a home there. And I think the legacy of it over time will only grow because of that.
It's, you know, CBGBs. In all honesty, if this was the 1970s, you know, the talking heads would come in and do your show. Television would do your show.
Yeah.
And a lot of people would go, I don't get it. And then it, you know, it's a tipping point.
So if that's explodes. Like, I do feel good about that. I feel like worst case scenario is on some guy who no one will really know, but then as time grows, they might realize, like, oh, that guy influenced a lot of the other people that I do like, you know? Like, that's the worst case scenario. I mean, well, no. Like, the worst case scenario is, like, I eventually succumb to my depression, hang myself, and then legions of my fans are like, yes, we will follow you into the abyss. Like, worst case scenario is I leave a tidal wave of copycat suicides.
Do you know that I was this close to ending this interview on a high note? I was so close that we were all going to go off feeling good until the death march took place. Right, I'm being told we can edit that. Good.
We can edit that. But let's be honest.
Yeah.
If I got hit by a bus today, best thing that ever happened for my career. I'd be a legend. I'd be a legend.
Yeah.
I would. It would be legendary. Everybody would be like, I got to download that show, man.
Yeah.
It would make the show 10 times cooler than anyone's ever thought of it. It's true, man.
Yeah. But at the same...
But I do like this. This is my shtick, that at the beginning, no one was comfortable with me saying this, and now they all think my death is hilarious.
Well, yeah. You're going to make it okay for everybody.
Yeah.
But the reality of it is, and I am serious about this, is it is a somewhat scary world, and I think it is the purpose of art to reach out and touch people, and you're able to do that with comedy, and I can't say that for all comedians, and you've found a way to do that.
That is the thing I always remind myself of, is there's a purpose to this that I didn't necessarily sign up for, but that is better than being the sidekick on a sitcom. It just is.
Yeah.
I feel better about this, so that means so much that you said that. Thank you.
Well, I'm also, you know, and the other part of this, and your fiance knows it, and your audience knows it, but you're a really good dude too.
Thank you. I do
and
my
that's
best.
important. And I think, and I'm going to make this prediction, it's just going to get bigger and bigger. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Chris.
This is so fun.
This is really great. Chris Gethard.
Thank you.